So I don't know what you take away from that video. I mean, you've probably forgotten all of it because you've only remembered 8 seconds, unlike the goldfish. But for me, speaking to a business community about digital media, I think in this context, this is kind of my takeaway from it. And that is that whether we like it or not, and as much as Scott wants to push back against it, these digital, mobile, social technologies have become so embedded in the lives of all of us that you as business owners in this day and age in 2015 don't really have much choice but to be successful in it. And if you don't believe the video, just a couple of stories that sort of illustrate the point. Troy and I were out in Spokane, Washington, their sister station out there 3 months ago, and we were driving into work in the morning to do something not unlike this in Spokane, listening to a story on the radio about how the Spokane City Council, I know this is Spokane, Washington, not to be confused with Seattle or ultra-liberal San Francisco. This is Spokane, Washington. City Council had allocated $100,000 of taxpayer money, wait for it, for free Wi-Fi for the homeless. Because the homeless have Wi-Fi connected smartphones. And that was what the Spokane City Council decided was the most effective way to communicate with them. It's legitimate, it's real, not a joke, I'm not making it up. You've probably heard of Farmers Only, right? It's an online dating community for farmers. Well, there's one for undertakers too. Deadmeat.com. It's real, it's live. You can check it out. I don't have an account on there that you know of. But really all that illustrates is there are little pockets and communities on the web today where anything and everything happens. And no matter what your business is, no matter what your business does, no matter who it is that you're trying to reach or what it is that you want them to do, there are certain aspects of being successful online that are critical to your business. Sort of another way to look at it, certain people love videos, some stories, some statistics, so here's a big fancy infographic. One of the ones I love is that 136 million emails were sent, see this down here? In the time that last slide about deadmeat.com was up on the screen. But more important than that, this is email, right? It's like the granddaddy of digital marketing. It's 30 years old. People have forgotten about it. Email usage grew 7.3% last year. It's a pretty healthy growth rate for any of you who are running a business, and that's like the oldest, archaic platform out here. But a lot of you are here because you have a relationship with a local TV station, and you heard Scott talking about the health and the power of TV, and I know we all probably watched the Super Bowl the other day. And I certainly, as a dyed-in-the-wool digital guy, would be the first one to tell you that television is the most effective medium that has ever existed for a business to fill in what you would call the top half of the purchase funnel, to let people in a community know that you exist, to let them know what you do, to perhaps make them feel good about what you do, and maybe even generate some purchase intent if you're really doing your job particularly well. But the rest of this presentation is really going to be focused on 3 critical words, and those are what happens next. And I may not have any background in TV, but Dave Eckstein will agree. What I'm about to show you is the best television commercial ever created. So that's not actually a real TV commercial, shock, right? It's from a 1980s movie, a Weird Al movie called UHF. But it actually is a really good TV commercial. And you'll know that because whether you like it or not, you're going to be singing that song tonight. You're going to be sitting in the car saying, Spatula City, because you can't help it. But the television commercial, or the Spatula City commercial, made a reference, if you were listening into it, about how, oh, we're in the yellow pages. Right? And there was a point in time when that really mattered. But in today's day and age, if you think about that TV commercial, and let's imagine it was your television commercial, and then let's imagine that Scott ran it on his most popular shows hundreds and hundreds of times, and everyone in this community had seen it so many times that they walked up and down the sidewalks in the snow, singing the song and thinking about getting that red plastic spatula for their loved one for Christmas. What happens next? What happens next in 2015 is a computer, period, every single time. It's usually, more often than not now, a computer that looks like this. We call this a cell phone, but it's really a computer and a camera that occasionally we send text messages on, and once in a while it rings and we shut off the ringer. It usually starts with a Google search box. Oftentimes it'll flow through reviews of what strangers have said about your business on sites like Yelp that will help me decide if I should use your business to get a spatula or just go to Target. Maybe it flows through a social media property that Troy will talk more about later, where people that you do know make suggestions about which businesses they use and don't use. Maybe it ends up in your email inbox. But more than half of the computer usage of people trying to find your business in this day and age are on phones. And if your website looks like this on phone, when this is how we use those computers on our phones, bad things happen. And it's not just the phone. There's an oft-quoted statistic that a business that doesn't have a mobile optimized or a website that works on a phone is more or less doing the equivalent of just randomly closing their business one day a week. Because essentially what you're doing is you're taking a consumer who wants to come and interact with you, who's on their phone, which means that their phone is not the only thing that's mobile, right? The person is mobile. They're probably in the act of trying to actually get to your store, figure out where you are you open, call you, and by not allowing them to use your site on their phone, you're turning them away. But the same thing more or less applies. If they want to get that spatula and they search Spatula City or Spatulas La Crosse and you're the spatula shop and you're not there, well, they can buy spatulas at Target and 100 other places. And if you're not on the first page of Google search results, in many cases, you may as well not even exist. If you don't exist in the places where people are, and it's another thing that Troy will talk a lot about in detail, but the two places on the internet that people are, social media and their inbox. They're the two most popular activities on the internet for all age groups, in all day parts, all demographics, all geographies, on all devices, in all countries, period. This is what people do. They don't spend hours and hours on your website, they spend hours and hours in social media and email. And if your businesses can't be found there, it's not a good thing. But this stuff can be confusing and daunting. And we use this mountain metaphor for a reason. This is Mount Everest. I'll come back to this metaphor a number of times. I think one of the reasons that I like this metaphor is for the very fact that it is as daunting. It can appear as daunting to a business as climbing Everest does. You often hear about and think about the really sort of sexy, interesting technologies at the very top of this mountain. Several of us had breakfast this morning with a gentleman who lives here locally, who has a really, really exciting and interesting digital marketing platform that effectively will guarantee you that for every $1 you give him, he'll give you back $5 in return. He can guarantee your return on investment, and that's fantastic. Very, very few digital or any other form of marketing initiatives can do that. But he's operating at the very top of the mountain. And we'll show you a couple other examples of that. You could, in theory, go and try to implement his plan, but in order to be successful at what he does, you have to have done all of these other things first. You have to have a mobile optimized and responsive website that works across all platforms, that can be found at the top of Google searches. You have to understand what your basic metrics are of how many unique visitors you have and what your bounce rates are. You have to know how to have created your own email list and be doing A/B and multivariate testing of the headlines and the creative and the copy in your emails and all of the various other things leading all the way up the mountain. And when you think about what all those things are, it can be pretty intimidating, especially when you look at starting down here at the very bottom. Search. Does your business show up at or near the top of a Google search for a relevant term about your business? Sort of like Digital 101. It's the most basic table stakes thing that your business could possibly try to do. You kind of almost have to do it. If you're not on the first page of Google, you might as well not open your store. But Google's quote-unquote algorithm, there's actually many, many algorithms. It's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lines of software code. It's been said to be the most closely guarded piece of intellectual property that has ever existed in the history of human business. Evidence for that is Edward Snowden pretty effectively hacked the NSA. The North Koreans, in theory, hacked Sony. They haven't hacked Google. And one of the reasons they haven't hacked Google is the people who work on Google search algorithms don't even see the whole thing. They don't know how it all works together. And I know this because I know several of them. Yet you're expected to go back to your business tonight and make sure that it shows up on the first page of Google search results. How are you supposed to do that? And that's the bottom of the mountain. The rest of the stuff is more complicated than that. So I would even argue, going back to what I said before, these technologies, digital, mobile, social technologies, are not just mandatory for you in 2015 as a business owner, but they're also impossible. And I return to the mountain metaphor for a second. When we first did a presentation not totally dissimilar to this in Madison about 8 months ago. It was just about a week after a large group of people had died on Everest. And no one's going to die as a result of anything we're talking about here today. But I would argue that having, for your business, having your website not work on a phone and not showing up on the first page of Google search results, not existing in social media, not having anyone out there leaving ratings and reviews about your business can be pretty close to lethal for a business. It's certainly a pretty dangerous thing for you to do, and it's another reason that we use this metaphor.